Excellent. So you guys, can you see the presentation?
Yeah.
And can you see me now?
We can see you.
Excellent. Okay. So who all, just for my awareness, who all's with us today?
We'll do a round table.
Okay, cool.
Lisa Cooter, I'm the clinical manager for the mental health team.
Okay.
And Chris Quigley, President of Dementia and Mental Health Intake. Claudia. You know me. I'm Karen Guy, I'm Claudia's assistant. Julie Gannon, who's the Public Services Coordinator. Julie Hollinger, Marketing Communications Coordinator. Christina McFadden, Volunteer Services Coordinator. Susan Clare, Children's Services Coordinator. And Deborah Roby, Private Home Daycare and Child Care Supervisor. Francis Grace, Deployment Support Coordinator. And Glad, Information Services Coordinator. And last but not least, me, Lori.
Okay, excellent. So so there's quite a few people around the table here now. The folks that are farthest away from the microphone, just if you're asking questions and stuff like that, if you could just approach the microphone just so that I could hear you a little bit better. And also, we're going to be recording the session, and that way people who didn't get a chance to join us today will be able to review it. They'll be able to hear you a lot better if you just approach within usually about 5 to 10 feet of the microphone. Alrighty. Okay, excellent. So I'm Jonathan from Military Family Services, and I'm here to talk to you about the exciting subject of performance measures. So that usually clears a room in itself. So, all right. So I'll just go over a little bit of the background of performance measures, and then just allow you guys to ask any questions, because I know that given the number of people who are on your side, I'm sure you've got plenty of things to get back to that are much more interesting. So I want to keep this short and sweet and provide you with the opportunity to ask any questions that you have, and then we'll work out some solutions together. Okay, just going to move the camera a little bit. All right, so let's head on to the first section. So I expect that several of you have probably, I know that Claudia has, and several others have joined us on the various video conferences and teleconferences that we've had around performance measures. We had one February and May of 2015, and then another one in March of 2016, and so we've had multiple consultations and stuff. So this is probably not your first time hearing about it, but that's why I'm going to breeze through fairly quickly the intro to performance measures. But just before we get to that, I just wanted to show you where on the website you find all stuff related to performance measures. So if you just go to, what I'm going to do is actually share, I just want to make sure we're recording here. Great. I'm going to share my desktop so that you can see the website. So if we go to the CFMWS website that you guys, I'm sure all of you have been to at one point or another, then if you click on MFS, you get to the page where it's Military Family or Military Family Resource Center. Just click on Military Family Resource Center, and then down close to the bottom of that, you can see there's sort of these subject areas. I think it's like the third one from the bottom is performance measures right here. It says Tiger Teams, and there's WebEx recording sessions, dashboard, and service delivery requirements. So if you just click on that, then that takes you to the one page where I put everything, just so that you guys won't have to search for it in multiple locations on the website. So here's an example of an older example of the dashboard that gives you an idea of how these stats might be presented. And then the website is just broken down into the first part. Right here is, can you see what I'm highlighting on the screen there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this first part here is just the forms to fill out, or the link to the survey, right? In terms of filling out the annual service delivery stats. I recently reorganized this to try to make it easier for you guys to navigate. Then you've got the PowerPoint presentations that I've given, the various ones over the years, frequently asked questions, often asked by you guys, and I just created sort of PowerPoints or Word documents to just put in writing what you guys have shared with me in terms of potential issues, conflicts in interpretation, and stuff like that. Then you've got sample sheets. So some of the MFRCs have been good enough to share some of the ways that they collect their data at the local level. We tried to do this in the Tiger team that's made up of many MFRCs across the country. We tried to create a global national sample sheet, and it really didn't work. What ended up happening was it was just this one-size-fits-all just did not work with the local local environment, because many MFRCs, you had your own way of gathering stats, you had your own intake forms, that kind of stuff. So what we decided to do was just share what the local MFRCs are doing, and then you can choose to either use it or modify it for your local needs. Then we've got the info about the Tiger team and the WebEx recording sessions, most of which I've put onto YouTube just to get it off the WebEx server, because we pay for that on a monthly basis to host the videos on the WebEx server, and also because YouTube is much easier for people to access as long as you aren't on the D1, of course. So skipping back to the presentation here. So yeah, I just put the link at the bottom there. And there's the page actually that we just had a look through, as well as the link. Okay. Any questions on that so far?
No.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I've got a pile of papers here, so you're going to hear some rustling in the background here. Okay. So like I said, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but this gives you the basic overview as to how performance measures sort of evolved within military family services. So if you want the real nitty-gritty of the detail, then feel free to go to the WebEx sessions that I mentioned on the website there, where I go into much more detail.
The system has detected that a few lines are still connected to the
I'm just shutting off the teleconference since no one's using that. I always like to have a backup plan in case WebEx isn't working. So yeah, we had several people, I think it was about 34 participants from 24 MFRCs that attended the video conference in April 2015. So that recording is on the website. So first of all, the Ombudsman's report, I expect all of you have either heard of it or read parts of it. It indicated the need for systematic performance measures for military family services on a recurring basis. So that was really our sign that, yes, we had performance measures, but were they systematic, were they useful, were they valid and stuff? That's one thing we had to look at. So then we started embedding those kind of principles in the operating plan in 2014 because we really wanted to show what's the tangible evidence of our investment in military families, because we know anecdotally from you guys and from being out in the field, many of our staff have worked out in the field and that we're making a difference at the local level, but we didn't have valid numbers to be able to back up that anecdotal or qualitative data. So that's what we were looking for. So the first, usually what people in the performance measures field tell you is that first of all, you got to determine what impact you're seeking to make. So what are the outcomes that you're going for? And then you build a logic model around those outcomes. So how are you going to, what outcomes do you want to achieve, and how then are you going to structure your activities in order to achieve those outcomes? So that was when the logic model was created in 2014. We consulted with 81 participants from 27 locations across Canada, US, and Europe. And those included military family members, MFRC staff, board members, as well as some of the military chain of command. So then, from that logic model, we then determined, okay, now that we know what impact we want to make, how are we going to measure that impact? So I really wanted to have sort of weekly contact with the MFRCs around the performance measures, which is where the idea of this Tiger team came up. So that's 10 MFRCs that were involved with that and continue to be involved to a certain extent from Halifax to Comox with the development and continued evolution of the performance measures. Now we have the MFRC service delivery data. So basically, we wound down e-business because it was creating so many problems in the field for you guys as well as for us. It was a real logistical nightmare. So we wanted to strip down the process, make it far less difficult to enter the numbers, and try to basically use our logic model to determine, okay, what questions do we really need to ask? And once we started doing that, we decided that, you know what, most of these questions that we're asking on the e-business center, we're not actually going to use that data, or it's not valid data. So we dropped it down. The number of questions that we asked you guys to fill out on an annual basis dropped from about 1,500 to about 50, which was good news because that's what we were seeking to do, is really streamline it and just ask for the data that we're only going to use. So questions. So I was going to cover some of these questions, but I wasn't sure how valid. I don't want to burn up time that you guys don't have just covering questions that you already know the answers to. So I'll just, have you guys seen this PowerPoint before?
No.
No? Okay, so I'll just go through the questions, and then so how do we get to a printable version of the survey? What's the average, question number 6 about the number of board members. Some of these have been fixed, by the way, in the latest version of the survey that's currently up on the web, as well as available on our website there in a Word or PDF form, I think. Question 1B, dealing with the back pilot projects. By the way, that's a little bit out of date now at this point, because the back pilot project is now being pulled out as separate data delivery for this coming year. And do you have a sample system of gathering these stats? Like I showed you on the website, those are some of the samples from the MFRCs. Is there anyone who wanted me to address any of these 4 questions?
No.
Nope.
We're good.
Okay. And then there was some other, these are just common questions from MFRCs. Is there a dashboard for mental health? Basically, mental health is included in a general dashboard of measures. What's the guide that you keep on referring to? That's actually within the stats. So I'll just show you actually. Hang on a second, I'm going to share my desktop. So right within here, within the website, you can see this document right here, stats, doc, and guidance. That's where the guidance is, right? So if you're ever looking for my explanation of what I mean by what I'm saying in the stats, then that should be in the guidance there. And if it's not, then let me know so that I can add it in for the next version. Some examples of mental health services, that's also in the guide. Are the flows included in the reporting? Yes, they are. Did anyone want me to go into those in more detail? Nope.
Do you want her to go into more detail? So which one? Mental health and the flow. Sure, I missed what you said. Do you need him to go into any more detail about any of the questions regarding the flow and mental health? At this point, no. I'm not sure the question. I know, but I know where the questions are coming from and what they were related to. It's in the guide. Like all the questions that you had to answer for the statistics is what this question is referring to. Right, but I don't know what that question was referring to. That's what I'm saying. At this point, I don't think when they're asking with other subcategories, I wasn't sure like that question was being asked. So I don't have a question about it. Okay. So I don't know. Okay, I think we're good, Jonathan. Okay. Yeah. Just on the screen there, you can see where in the Microsoft Word document or PDF that I showed you on the website there, where the mental health questions are for all these.
And then the guidance is just a little bit further on for mental health. The guidance is this portion at the end of the document, and the mental health goes on for like about a page because I wanted to make sure it matches up with everything Linda Manser is doing in terms of the spectrum of mental health services. Okay. What's included in staff hours dedicated to programming, mental health stats questions, where do we put additional info? There's a dialog box after each question just so that you can put additional info if you wanted to put it, or the way that you interpret the stats. Other sources of funding, where are the definitions? So those are now included in the latest version of the stats guidance document. So you can see here at the, I think it's around here, that, yeah, other sources of funding. Basically, I copied and pasted this from the old funding review document because this has now been removed from the funding document and put into this document, the stats reporting, because this is the only place that you'll declare other sources of funding. Does MFS Public include the Veterans Pilot? No, they're calculated separately. Okay.
Can we just go back to the question about what's included in staff hours dedicated to programming, just to get clarity on that, so we're all in the know?
Yep, absolutely. Okay, hang on a second. So basically, this includes all hours spent on program planning, but it also includes, so leading up to the program, it's not just when you're sitting there in front of the people delivering the program. It's all the program planning that takes place before that, program delivery, and the program evaluation after the fact, if you do have a program evaluation. So all of those are considered to be programming hours. It's a little bit more, well, it's actually a lot more outlined in the guidance document. There's a much more fulsome explanation, I believe. Just looking for it here. Turnover, dedicated programs, yeah. So then I provide examples here of an employment coordinator and whatnot. So if after reading through that, it still doesn't make sense to you guys, then feel free to let me know and I can include additional sort of interpretation details, because this is a working document, right? It's only as useful as you guys find it to be able to answer these questions. So if there's something I need to tweak, then just let me know. Does that answer the question?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
That's good, thank you.
Yeah, okay. And basically just the last slide was, what does this mean for you? So hopefully it means at the end of the year, less work and finagling around the e-business center and all the technical issues we had around that, which is why I've gone really low tech and basically sent you a PDF or uploaded to the website a PDF guidance document, and then just asked you to fill out an online survey similar to Fluid Survey, SurveyMonkey, all that kind of stuff, rather than going through some sort of complicated stats gathering program. So we've reduced the service delivery questions, like I said, from around 1,500 to a little over 50 on a yearly basis. You collect these stats. It depends on the MFRC and how you work your stats collection. So it's collected either on a weekly or a monthly basis and submitted every April or May. And that will provide us with valid, reliable, tangible evidence for not only for the people that we report to, but also for, we know that through our stats that you guys have a lot of other funders as well, right? Not just MFS. So a lot of funders, actually pretty much all funders, are asking for stats to show what uptake you're getting in programs, what the outcomes that you're achieving, that kind of stuff. So hopefully these stats that you gather, you can use as well with other funders to show that, yes, we are providing tangible impact, not only through these testimonials, but you can see through the numbers. So that was the end of my formal presentation, but I wanted to open it up to any questions that you guys have.
Can we talk a little bit about number 10, ratio of volunteer to paid staff?
Yep.
It's very foggy.
Okay.
This seems to confuse us year after year.
Right.
Because all of that work is volunteers. Obviously, the volunteers are in the program. However, they don't work directly in the volunteer program.
Yeah.
And we know in the guidelines there's the Red Cross explanation, but even that seems to be clear as mud.
Okay. Yeah. Good to know. Okay. So. Okay. So, what in particular did you have questions about?
So total number of volunteers, that's easy. We got that one down pat.
Yeah.
Total number of new volunteers, we're good with that one.
Okay.
Total number of volunteer hours, we're good with that one.
Okay.
It's total number of full or part-time staff who work in the volunteer program that we struggle with.
Right.
Because we have one full-time volunteer coordinator, who that's what her role is. However, many of our other staff members work with volunteers on a regular basis.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we're capturing the information you're looking for consistently across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I usually point to in this regard is because when you talk about staff delivery, everybody thinks we need absolute accuracy here. And it's true, we want to have numbers that are accurate as possible. But a lot of the time with your MFRC and most of the other MFRCs, what happens is they might have one full-time or part-time volunteer coordinator, but a lot of the other staff work with volunteers as well, right? That's the reality of not-for-profit. So what I suggested was what Tracy Cromwell mentioned down here at the bottom is that once a year, so she met with the staff to determine their allocation of time. So basically, the program and volunteer manager allocates their time as follows: 15% in admin duties, 55% programming, and 30% volunteer duties. When I prepare the reports, rather than having her track what she's doing each and every hour, which would be really cumbersome, I use a percentage of her total hours. So that gives you, basically, if you have that particular manager is spending 30% of their time in volunteer duties, then if they're a full-time employee, that would be 0.3 FTE dedicated to volunteers. So that's, and basically you just figure out, okay, does this staff member spend about 10% of their time? That would be 0.1 FTE, and then just add up all the FTEs for a total. And that'll give you your total FTE staff allocation dedicated to volunteer duties.
So just so we're clear, because there's a little bit of questioning around the table.
Okay.
What you're saying is, so if myself in finance, if I use volunteers, or my staff use volunteers on a somewhat regular basis, and we allocate 5% of our time to working with, managing, interacting with our volunteers, then we would put 5% of our FTE into this particular statistic.
That's right. Yeah.
I have another example. Let's say childcare we have a volunteer that comes every morning. So 60% of staff time, the volunteer is with the staff and helps out. So would it?
No. So that the supervisor of that daycare would combine and assign a percentage. So she's going to say out of her time, maybe 10 or 15% of her time is dedicated to volunteers. You're not tracking how many hours they're working with the volunteer. You're just assigning a percentage of their time. So what he would be saying is maybe twice a year, we sit down as a team and you send a letter out coordinator saying, tell me what your volunteer time percentages are, and they have to work that out. And that's where he's saying, yes, it's a guess, but you're just doing the best guesstimate that you can. And it's going to boil down to that staff member working with volunteers, they have to assign a percentage of time. And then for children, you can just total it. And then when all those totals come in, we'll add it up for however many FTE equivalents. Because if you're doing, you know, children's services is 5% and finance is 5%, but community engagement is 20%, when you get to 100%, that's one FTE. Correct?
Yep, that's right. Yep, that's right.
So for a volunteer coordinator, my assumption would be that because that is her role, that her one FTE would be automatic.
Yeah, pretty much, unless she spends, I mean, in some cases, with not-for-profit, because you have to wear many hats a lot of the time as a staff member, you might spend like 20% of your time just doing miscellaneous duties for another staff member, or for the deputy ED, or someone like that, right? So okay. So you would subtract that, but yes, if they're the volunteer coordinator, most of their time would be included.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Great. That helps a lot. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Were there other questions about some of the other stats?
John, can I ask a question?
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So we did a fundraiser, and as a marketing coordinator, I was involved with Christina. We were both working with the same volunteers a certain amount of time. Do we both count our equivalent hours, or is it only one because it's only one chunk of time, one task?
Sorry, could you move a little bit closer to the mic? You're sort of cutting in and out.
She's coming.
Okay,
so
perfect.
We're working on a fundraiser. We have a volunteer committee that is working on the fundraiser with us. So there are two of us who are there. We are both spending 20, 30 different times with the volunteers, working with the volunteers on the event.
Yep.
Do we count both of our time for that, or one of us, because it's a single task for volunteer committee?
Right. So it's two staff members working on that?
Yeah, so it's one committee, but we're working on different things with them.
Yeah, I would include both of you, because even though you might be working together and sort of spelling each other off in that, there'll be times when one volunteer is speaking to one and one volunteer is speaking to another and stuff. So just for the sake of simplicity, given that you're both required to be there because of the burden of the event itself, I would count you both.
Thank you.
Yep.
John, Lisa, in terms of the mental health stats, I'm just wondering, just for clarification, if we're looking at FTE, would we use a similar type of formula that if you've got a staff member who does a group, then percent of that group time might be 10% of their job, so it would be like 0.1 FTE, and if there's two of them, we would multiply it by 2. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, let's keep it simple and calculate it all the same way, because we know that, you know, it's pretty rare for MFRCs to have sort of full-time counselors on board. A lot of the time you have multiple duties, and so only a percentage of your time will be spent on a particular mental health aspect. So yeah, just calculate it as a percentage of FTE, just like we did with the volunteer duties.
That's great. That's what we have been doing. I just wanted to make sure we were on par.
Yep, okay.
Now I'm going to ask questions if you have them.
Just deployment overall, where do I put in my stats?
Sorry, which role?
So in deployment.
Yeah.
She's coming.
Okay.
We're in a large echoey room, sorry.
Yeah.
So just wondering in terms of deployment, because I do so many different things. When it's programming, that's pretty simple. I'll use it as programming. But what about some of the other things that I do in terms of deployment, so the one-on-ones and the DAGs and the briefings with soldiers specifically? So how and where I put all those seems to be very, depending on how I feel, is just where I put it. So how can we be consistent in where we put all those things?
Right. So basically, that'll call for it calls for a bit of a judgment call on your part in terms of how you're going to calculate that. Now, first of all, what I want to say is that when we streamlined these stats down to as few stats as we needed, what we ended up doing was basically cutting out a lot of the stats, a lot of the 1,500 questions we asked before. But that's not to say that that work is not important to military families. It's just that the way the stats that we're gathering are the only ones that we require to report up the chain of command. So there are a lot of positions that aren't specifically noted within the stats that are still important, we know, for military families. So don't take the lack of stats around them, for instance, lack of stats around, particular positions, PDCI and all this kind of stuff, family separation and reunion and that. We took a lot of that detailed data out because we didn't need that level of detail. So please don't take that as an assumption that the work isn't important, because we know it is. In terms of deployment, what you were saying is that you do a number of duties around deployment support. Some of them might be workshops, some of them might be sort of info and referral sessions and that sort of thing. So what I would do is kind of make a judgment call. Your work is included in the number of family contacts, because that's family contacts overall for the MFRC. It's also included in terms of number of family members served. But the only other place probably that it might be, your work might be included, is if you were involved in some sort of welcome information. You might be included under number 4, but more likely, and I think this is what you were saying before, some of your workshops might fall into the peer support or psychoeducational, right? Because you're talking about deployment support issues, you might be getting into a bit of the road to mental readiness, some of the mental health fluctuations that occur prior to a deployment, during a deployment, and then after the return of the military member. So that falls more into the mental health realm. And so you make a judgment call based on the amount of time that you spend on that, and then insert your data in whichever column makes sense. Does that sound like it makes sense?
It does and it doesn't, to be honest, Jonathan. So Pride Cross and Mobility FSNR coordinated across national, we're all separate in how we're doing it. So right. There is a big inconsistency how it's done. So that's how I've been doing it, how you've explained it, just to try to fit it in where I think it is. But again, it's still it's too subjective, I guess. Right.
Yeah, and it will be subjective, because the reality is that the Military Family Services program is the same and different, right? It's got certain outcomes, but the way that it's run at the local level will depend on the community needs. And so a program, a deployment support in Petawawa might look quite different from the way it does in Halifax, right? Just because of the local community needs, what's provided by the community and what's not. So there will be those inconsistencies, but the general idea is to look at what the service that you're offering, does it fall, for instance, under these kinds of definitions in terms of connecting people that share experiences to support recovery? Does it have a mental health focus, more psychoeducational in terms of focusing on prevention and personal growth through education? And I provided some examples down there in terms of R2MR, Minds That Matter, Intercom, and stuff like that, stress prevention. So if those are the kinds of workshops that you're offering, then I would include your numbers within those rows.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. It sounded like there might have been 2 questions about mental health. Was that the only one?
The only other question is about, and I think it's one that I suspect a lot of MFRCs struggle with, is that distinction between psychosocial and mental health services, because the mental health services are not mandated, right?
Yeah.
But in like Petawawa, we often get a lot of families who have that formal diagnosis of depression, and there's no one in the community that they get support. So we have that service. We're not doing the diagnosis, but we are providing some of the support to help them manage and cope. So just making sure that we're putting that in the mental health services or in psychosocial.
Yeah. Yeah, and and you're absolutely right. I mean, that's what Linda Manser has found as well through her environmental assessments and stuff about what kinds of mental health services are out there. Very few MFRCs actually provide the mental health, the focused mental health services in terms of formal assessment and diagnosis and that, which is why it's not right now a mandated service. The reason why we're capturing that is because if we notice a huge uptake in that you guys are finding a real need for this, then it may mean that we need to change the policy around that, and we need to request a change that it do become a mandated service. So we really need to gather stats on each one of these. But when you're looking through these definitions, if something doesn't make sense, or you think, does this fall into that category rather than this one, then just give me a call, send me an email, and we can work it out together, and then I'll adjust the description to fit that new kind of definition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Now's your time, get it there.
By the way, now's not the only time, so don't feel too much on the hot seat. This is just to provide you with a general overview, but I'm always happy to take calls or emails and stuff. If after the meeting you think, oh, I should have asked them that or whatever, then don't be afraid to give me a call and we'll work it out, because this is kind of, like I said, it's an evolution, right? And we want to make sure that it makes as much sense to you as possible so that we get consistent data.
Last call, any other questions before we free Jonathan? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. We appreciate your time this morning.
No problem. Yeah, and like I said, anytime you have questions or if you want to see something else up on the website or whatever it might be, just give me a call, fire me off an email, and I'm happy to have another one of these sessions or just talk with you one-on-one.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, you too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye for now.
I will say, you guys are going to send out an email